Welcome to week 11, day 50 of the spring 2025 Web Technologies course. I'm Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. So today we're going to go over Chapter 12, JavaScript Chapter 12, how to work with numbers, strings, and dates. So first I wanted to, actually before that, just real quick here. So I was looking at the Chapter 12 lab, and there's some complexity to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify it a little bit. I kind of already mentioned that, I think, in my email. I said I'd have it done by Tuesday morning. But what I think I'm going to go ahead and do on this one instead is I'm going to go ahead and create a separate video on this lab. So you can kind of walk through that to help you get through this lab. And I should have that completed. I know people are working on their hands-on test, and you have other work to do. So it shouldn't disrupt you too much. So I should have that completed by the end of the day on Wednesday. A separate video on this lab for you to work on. All right. So how to work with numbers, strings, and dates. So I'm going to skip through some of this stuff, make it easier on us. So the number object, here's a static properties of the number object. They have got max value, min value. Then you also have what's called safe integers, max safe integer, min safe integer, positive infinity, negative infinity, epsilon, and not a number. So as far as the max values, I know we've done a little bit with this, I believe. I know we did actually not a number. But, maybe in some of the assignments we did a little bit with that. We'll take a look at this. So basically, here's examples of static properties of the number object. So here you're doing as a result, you have some result. And then is it equal to infinity? The result, so if it's greater than number dot max value, if it's greater than that number dot max value, it's going to be infinity. If it's less than number dot min value, it's going to be negative infinity. All right. And then obviously one of the things that a number can return is NaN, right? Is not a number. And we're gonna look at this a little bit here. So here, let's just go ahead and grab a couple things, just for the heck of it. Here, just gonna grab this. So the first one will display not a number. Second one's going to display infinity, and the third one's going to display negative infinity. So let's go ahead and do that real quick to look at that. So I'm just going to go ahead and do an F12 here and open up developer tools. Oh, wrong thing. Had focus in the wrong area there. So if I paste that in here, as you can see, the first one is going to be 0 divided by 0. It's going to be not a number. That's what it's going to return. The next one is going to be 10 divided by 0, which is infinity. Okay. And the third one is going to be, negative 1 divided by 0 is going to be negative infinity. So here we're looking at the safe and unsafe integers. And as you can see, so basically so let's just talk about the max safe integer. So in JavaScript, it represents the maximum safe integer value that can be precisely represented. Okay, it's values. This large number. We'll take a look at that here. Actually, let's just go ahead and do that real quick here. Let's go take a look at that. again. So this is the maximum safe integer value, okay? And then you can also, let's take a look at the min one as well. We can just change this to min here. And that is the min, right? Just a negative sign. So same number, just a negative instead of a positive. So that's the maximum safe value, and that's the minimum safe value, okay? So the maximum safe integer is a JavaScript, in JavaScript represents the maximum safe integer value that can be precisely represented. So if you add or subtract from that, you may be surprised at your results. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the thing here. So here, this is doing a safe one. So you could take a max value and subtract 1 from it because it's going to be less than max, right? That makes sense. And then here you're doing the same thing where you're taking a max value integer and subtracting 2, right? So if you do a safe 1 equal safe 2, it's going to display false because you subtracted 1 from one of them and you subtracted the next one, safe 2, you subtracted 2. So obviously they're not going to be equal, right? But here in this case, we're doing a number max safe integer plus 1, okay? And here we're doing a number max safe integer plus 2, right? And in this case, believe it or not, 2 big 1 and 2 big 2, even though the first one you're adding 1, second one you're adding 2, they're actually going to be true. So let's kind of actually take a quick look at that as well here. So in this case, I'm going to have to get rid of something here because it's going to blow up, I think, here. Because I don't have this defined. Get rid of that. There we go. So here, let's hit enter. So it's just returning true. It's displaying true because even though you added 1 here, add 2 there. So let's just do this real quick. Let's take a look at that. Let's break this down a little more. Here. Let's see. So let's take, here's our number. Let's add 1 to this. And as you can see up here was our max, right? And even though it's our max, we can add 1 more to that, okay? But what if we try to add 2 to that? If we add 2 to that, it's not going to go any further. It's reached its max. So, and then if we add 4 to that, it's just how this works. So that's really interesting, isn't it? All right. So obviously we've done toFixed a lot for decimal places. And we've done parseInt, right? Static methods of the number object is not a number, is finite, is integer, is safe integer, okay? And we're going to take a look at these a little bit more in depth here in a minute. So here's some examples of static methods of a number object. So obviously the first one is not a number, so it's returned true. This is going to return true because this is an array of numbers. This is an object, and this is these. Even though you've got numbers in here, this is an object array. So this is an array where so is not a number is also true. And then also if you do not a number. Is not a number, not a number. This also returns true. Okay. Yeah. So here in this case, it's actually doing a little bit of like conversions and stuff, right? So this makes a difference. And then we're doing this finite. Okay, I don't want to get too far into some of this. All right, let's look at some code here to look at some more examples. So like we start at the beginning, if you do, you basically we're setting, this is setting a div or whatever to infinity. So by this, you're just setting this infinity. Obviously, this is a number infinity, and so for infinity, you don't have to prefix this with the name number dot, right? For infinity, you can just say infinity. Same with not a number. You don't have to do number dot not a number. You can just do not NaN, right? For max value and min value, you have to prepend it with number, and the same with the max safe integers. Okay. So we're just spitting these out to see what it is. I skipped epsilon. So epsilon is a property that represents a small interval between two numbers. I guess in simpler terms, it's the smallest possible difference between two numbers that JavaScript can distinguish. All right, let's look at some other stuff here. So obviously you've done this before. Now, we're doing two fixed, two decimal places, right? So it's going to round it based on this number. It's going to round it. In this case, it's going to be 70.88, right? Here, it's just basically converting that to a string. So whatever value basically you put in here, it's going to just result the string value of that, right? It's not going to round anything, right? It's just going to do that. And then here's a situation. Let's see, is not a number. So here we can put in some text. And I'm going to just put in test is not a number. It's true, right? We put in a number, false. So is it finite? It is true. It is finite. If we put in is it integer? False, right? Because we have decimal places. So we get rid of our decimal places and do is an integer. It's going to be true. Is a safe integer, right? So let's just put in our max value here. And then is that finite? That's true. Is it an integer? True. Is it a safe? False, right? Put in 3 here. So it's anything above 1 is going to return false here. 1 at the end here, right? So we do 1 here, we'd be fine. Did I mess up the number here? Yeah. Okay. Here we've got absolute value, right? So for some reason I don't know why this is coded this way. So here, absolute value. So if you do, let's do a different number here. So if we do a negative number, if we do a -5 for an absolute value, it's going to basically absolute, an absolute value of a number is it's basically it's a distance from 0 on the number line. So, in simple terms, it'll just remove the negative sign from a negative number and leave, the positive numbers stay as they are. And 0 will be stay a 0 as well. So we'll put a 0 in here. It's going to return 0. We put a positive number. It's going to return a positive number. But any negative number, it's going to remove the negative sign, right? Then here we're just doing a basic rounding. Same thing as what toFixed would do. It would help if I put things in there, right? So this is just rounding this up to 77, right? If we do something like 77.11 and we hit ceiling. So what's this going to do? Even though anything greater than 0 here is going to it's going to round it up to the next one, right? If we did that, it's going to stay 77. Anything after the decimal point, doesn't matter what it is, right? It's going to round it up to 78, right? So that's ceiling. For floor, so here, if we do like a 78.99 and we hit floor, it's going to round this down to the lowest point. So it's just going to be 78, right? Doesn't matter how big this number is, right? It's always going to be rounded to the lowest, right? And then here, basically what you're doing here is it doesn't matter what you put. If you put a little number, you put a bigger number in here, it's just going to truncate the whatever after the decimal place. Okay. So this is POW, right? So POW. So this performs. This is exponential numbers, right? So we put in, say, a 5 and a 2. This is going to be basically 5 times 5. So 5 times 5 should result 25. Okay, let's look at that code just so you can see. So all these others were pretty basic as far as, I probably should have showed you some of these, but, for absolute value, it's .abs. For rounding, you just do .round. Ceiling, .ceil, and then you got your floor, you got your truncate. And then you just need to make sure for your exponential numbers that you have to include 2, right? You have to pass the base and the exponent, right? So in this case, our base is 5 and our exponent's 2. And then next one, square, basically 16 squared should be 4, right? And then we've also got the min and max. So for min and max, what we do there, we can pass it 2 numbers, and it's going to grab, well, that's the max. So let's do 60 and 10. So the result's 10. In this case, you got max between 40 and 20. It's going to return 40. Okay. And then let's look at random here. So random here, this button, this is just going to return a random. So just the math.random function, it generates a random floating point number, between 0 and 1. So it's always going to be less than 1. Okay. Now, if you want to create a random integer, okay, the way you do that, there's some different ways, but here's one way to do that. Is you take your random, you take your math random, you multiply that by 10, and in this case, we're doing a random integer between 1 and 10, right? And then we do math.ceiling on that, okay? So then if I just keep on clicking this, you'll see a random integer of 1. This times it's 7, 10, 7. It's doing 7 and 10 a lot. 8, 10. That does happen with JavaScript. That is kind of an interesting thing, this random stuff. Sometimes does a lot of... you have to do some additional coding to really make things random. It's just how this random function works. You actually have to do some additional coding to make it a little more random. It seems to repeat a lot. It's very interesting in that case. But, just keep on clicking this. It's doing random numbers between 1 and 10. Okay. If you want to change this to random numbers between 1 and 5, we can just change that to that. And then there we go. Anywhere between 1 and 5. Okay, so let's look at some of the JavaScript stuff here. I mean, not JavaScript, some of the string object stuff. I think this is all... let's see what we had here. This is that application. So one property of the string object, .length. We've looked at that before, right? You got your .length. Returns the .length of the string. Now, there's other ones as well. There's char at, there's concatenate, there's index of, there's the substring. And we can look at that. 2 lowercase, 2 uppercase. And so we'll take a look at some of those here. So let's look at the code a little bit. So I do testing here. There's .length. We've done this before. We already know that one. Here, we're using char at. So we're taking the string that we're going to be putting, and I think it's going to be using the string input. Yeah, it'll be using this one that I already put in here. So string input, it's going to take that string, and then it's going to do a parse int on that, okay, and that's going to use that as an index. So I am going to okay. So what I'm going to say here is I want to know what. Let me put in a 3, and char at. It's going to tell me t. So basically, you're counting from left to right. So here's 0, 1, 2, 3. The third one is the t. It's 0 base. It starts at 0, right? So the third one, the third index starts at 0 is going to be that t. So we change that to a 1, and that 1's going to be e because t's the 0, and then 1 is the e. And then concatenating. So we got testing, and then we're just going to put a space again. Hit concatenate. Now we got testing again, right? We can do index of a certain thing. So let's do the index of S, and it's going to return basically 0, 1, 2. 2 is the S, so it's going to return the 2 there, right? So we can actually start at, let's start at 3 on this. This is going to do substring. Let's start at 3. And let's do that for 1, 2, 3. Oh, I really want to do the next one. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to do 4 for 3. So really want to point out here is when you're doing the substring like this, you're starting at, 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 is the I. And you're doing it, the second value is how many places you want to go past that. So you want to go for 3, not past that, but including that. So for 3 places, 1, 2, 3 is going to be the ing. All right. So that was substring. And then here, so for this one, let's do a start index of 1 and do an end index of 3, right? And it's going to be the first one and the third one. So here's 1. And then to the end, which would be the S here. And it's actually the second one, not to confuse you here, it's not, the second one is exclusive, so it's not going to count that one, right? So it's going to start at 1, which was here, but it's not going to include this T here, which is the third one. It's actually before that, right? A little confusing. You can play with it a little bit just to see how it works, so you understand that. But it's going to start there, and then it's going to end here, but it's not going to include that. It's going to exclude that one, right? So in that case, it's only going to be the ES. And then here we just got 2 lowercase, which is basically we already have our thing there, 2 uppercase. We've done that one before. Let's see here. Starts with. So basically, does it start with a T? Is it because it made it? Is it because it made it uppercase? Okay, tell me why that's not working. I've got to, let's see what we're doing on that. I put it in the wrong field. So we put the T there. Yes, it starts with a T. And it's going to end with a G, right? So if I put a G in here, it's going to be true. Anything else, it's not going to, should be false. So that's the difference between starts with and ends with. Pretty basic, pretty standard there. So includes, basically, does it include IN? Does testing include IN? Yes, it does. That's going to return false. So here, trim start includes. So if I change this, let me change this one. Let me add a bunch of spaces here. Good, it's picking up those spaces. Then if I do a trim start, so that's going to trim that start part. If I do a trim end, okay, it's not quite giving me what I was hoping to see there. Maybe it's because it's saving that. yeah, it's just kind of how this is written. I'm sorry about that. So I'll look into this. I don't see why. Depends on how this is created. Let's skip over pads. So we'll get into dates here a little bit. So summary of how the date constructor work. I know we've done a couple different things with dates already, but so we do have a date constructor, have date object set, and it's set to the current date and time. You can have a string value, creates a new date object set to the date and the time of the string. You can have numeric values, creates a new date object set to the year, month, day, hours, minutes, seconds, etc. And when you do it, year and month are required. Date object creates a new date object that's a copy of the date object it received. And then invalid values creates a new date object contains invalid date. Okay. So different ways to do it. You can just do just like this. Actually, let's grab this and real quick and look at that. I think actually we have it in our code here though, don't we? What do we have on dates here? So, basically we're just creating a new date here, right? So actually this should already be there. So if I actually end up going, just going to hit F12 over here and have our date. So there's our basic creating that's just a new date, using the new date object. That's going to be our value in that case, right? And then we can do different things with that, right? I can be using the screen, I know, but this is actually creating a string of that date, right? That's creating a string of this. This is just returning the date object, right? This is the value of that date object. This is actually returning the string value, which is basically the same, but just to show you the difference, this is actually now a string and not a date object here anymore, right? And we can also do a current date to date string. Okay, let's look at that. So that's just going to give you the day of the week, the month, right? The day. The day of the week, the month, the day of the month, the month, and then the actual date in the month, and then the year, right? Now we'll do this one here. Just different formats, right? All kinds of different formats. All depends on what you're looking for, what you're needing, what you're wanting to do with it, right? So these return strings. The very first one return the date object, right? The current date object. These three return strings. Now we're back to this. And this is basically the millisecond date. This is the long date, get time. This is current date dot get time. And this can be used, this serves some function. Sometimes when you want to get this date and then you 2 minutes later, you want to get it again, and then you're going to subtract it, right? Because it's going to change, right? So let's just go take another look at it. Here, let's get that up there, okay. Okay. That made me a liar. All right. I don't know why. On that one, I expected that to be different. We'll try it here in a little bit. Let's get our full year here. I guess I'm used to other different programming languages working a different way, right? Because I know we used to actually do that. We used to, especially like when we had some long running processes that we would, before we executed a long running process, we would get we'd get a timestamp, we'd get the time, and then when that process stopped, we'd get the time again, so we knew how long that process took, right? And probably don't realize. What if I just do this? There we go. It's just because it has nothing to do with JavaScript. It has to do with it's cached in the browser, right? It was cached in the browser. So obviously, if I go ahead and do this again now, each time I do this, it's going to change. So had nothing to do with the language. Sorry, I was a little perplexed by that, but as I should have thought about it, it's going to get cached in the browser, because the browser does things like that, right? It caches things, so it cached that value. But once I hit a refresh and did it again, you get the new value. Current date too. So it's going to be zero based, right? The first month is going to be a 0. The second month is February. Third month is March, right? But it's it's 0 based. So 0 for January, 1 for February, right? And 2 for March. I said that incorrectly. This is basically kind of a seems like kind of a strange thing to say, date, you would think it would return something different, but this is actually, the day of the month, right? Which is 18th. We get the day though. This gets hours. Get the minutes. Obviously get the seconds here. Yeah, and that's just returning the milliseconds, right? Date set full year. So then, so let's go ahead and close this up. And then here we can do did that. So there's, basically creating a date object based on the value you're putting in here, right? You're just creating so obviously you put something in here. Let's see over here. So that would be interesting. Yep. So the year 4000 or the year 1000, it's still going to create a date object. All right. So here you can set the month. So I currently, the month, is so 2, let's put in a 1. And like we said, it's 0 base. 0 would have been January. February is a 1. So it's going to change the month to February, right? Let me see. I don't know. So the first one, we're setting the full year to 2023, right? setting the month to February, right? And then we can continue on from there. Set the date. So that's going to be February 1st. Set the hours. Set the minutes. Set the seconds. Not too difficult to understand, you know, and actually, you know, a lot of the date object stuff is pretty straightforward. You know, you're just setting the seconds, you're setting the minutes, setting the hours, etc. So pretty straightforward on that. So that's about really all I have on this. So besides for this chapter, all you really have is the written test. You have the written test, and then you have that lab. And so, like I said, I'm going to go ahead and create a separate video on that lab. So please let me know if you have any questions about anything else, and have a good day.